Welcome to Hotgates Gaming for another Dark Souls the board game painting video, here with your Hotgates Gaming host James. Much asked for, it's been a little while since we've done a painting tutorial, but I have in front of me the Silver Knights from Dark Souls the board game, and I'm going to be giving you a quick tutorial on how to batch paint these super quick, ever so slightly differently to how we did the Knight in the Night painting tutorial. Remember, you can support this content by checking the links in the video description below, and that includes buying from Element Games using those links and the code which will give you double store credit. Let's get down and show you what to do. So of course these miniatures have already been washed in hot soapy water to clear away that release agent, and that's really important before you start applying any kind of paint to these miniatures. Now of course the name of the game with batch painting is to try and get this done quick, and for this I'm going to be using the Citadel Lead Belcher model spray paint. So it is a primer, but it does mean that we are going to be putting silver straight onto those miniatures. Now you see that the miniatures are inside a box. That's because I'm doing this inside the Element Games Northwest Gaming Centre, and you don't want to be getting spray everywhere. It's exactly the same if you do it in your backyard and the like. I do recommend that you do this in a well ventilated area, and do try and spray the spray paint from at least 15 centimeters away, and try and get a nice light dusting and coating. I'm going to give that just a nice little shake, and just from a bit of a distance just going to start spraying that all over, and we'll go around do the other side and show what they look like when they're done. And there you have it, absolutely super quick. Now if you're incredibly lazy, you could just leave them like this. They are now of course silver. However, we're not going to do that. We're going to let them dry, and then we are going to start applying some washes. Now if you're worried about being able to follow what paints and washes and equipment you should be using to paint these, then what I will do is put a link in the video description below, which will lead to a bundle of what you can purchase in order to be able to create the effect that we're going for today. Another quick thing to point out is that when you get plastic miniatures that are kind of one mold like this, sometimes you can get this syndrome, Bendi weapon syndrome. Now it's easy to fix this. What you do, just place that in hot water and then just shape it to where you want it to go, and it will straighten itself out. If they are exposed to heat, then they will bend again. You can also use a hairdryer as well. Just a little top tip to keep your miniatures nice and straight. So now that the primer has dried, I need to ink these bad boys, and I'm going to be using the Army Painter War Paints Ink Dark Tone. I do like this one. It's not quite black, which I think works really well, because it's very unnatural to kind of get natural blacks in real life, of course. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to give the ink a good shake. That's really important. I'm going to squeeze it onto the palette reasonably generously, and then I'm going to apply using the Element Games Character Series brush. Now the reason I do this is a little bit bigger, because I can go over everything, but I don't want too big a brush because I still want to be able to drag the ink into the various details. So what we're going to do is we're going to pick up one of these Silver Knights like so, and we're just going to start putting that ink all over, and you can see straight away, just with a little bit of an ink, you start to create some depth and the shading, which is exactly what you want it for. So what we'll do is we'll come back when all these guys are done. Now that that ink is drying, you can really see the depth that just putting a little bit of ink on a miniature creates, and it pretty much finishes off that silver as well. What I have found is that by using the Lead Belcher silver spray as opposed to the paint straight out of the pot, is that it does seem to create a little bit of a lighter silver than when you do use it from the pot. And as such, when you put the shading over it, naturally because the shaded ink goes into the recesses, you end up with a highlighted raised area anyway. Now you could accentuate this by going over it again with maybe a Citadel Lead Belcher, or even using Iron Breaker, which is slightly brighter again. I would tend to maybe edge highlight this with a Runefang Steel, but today this is a quick paint that we're going for, so we're going to move on to the next area. And a really important thing when you're painting miniatures is you've got some kind of source material that you refer to. So what I've done is I've got my, whoa, look at that for shininess, I've got my my iPad here, and I literally just looked up a picture of a Silver Knight because I wanted to see if there were any other colours in there, and there does seem to be, of course, the cloak, which is kind of like a weathered, sandy, dirty bone colour, which I'll show you how to do next, and then there's also the black behind the armour on the backs of the legs, and also some leather. So what we'll do is we'll get to that straight away. We're going to start off with the capes, and in order to do that I am going to start with the Citadel colour Zandri Dust, which is a base colour, which means it's a little bit thicker. Now I like to start when I'm painting a light colour such as white with a darker colour. So rather than paint a colour that you're going for and then wash it with ink and then start working up from there, sometimes it's better just to work from a darker colour than what you're going for. So we are going to use this Zandri Dust here, and I'm going to be using the Army Painter Hobby Precise Detail Brush. Again, you'll be able to see that in the bundle below. So we're going to take a little bit of paint onto the palette from the pot. Again, make sure that you don't put too much paint on the brush. Try and always keep the paint away from going down to this end. Take a tiny little bit of water and mix that in, and then start applying, dragging away from the paint, twist it just so you create a nice fine point. And then you want a nice thin layer. We want multiple thin layers here, so I'm going to pop this on, I say reasonably generously, but remember this is just the first coat, so you'll be able to see the silver through it. That's not a problem, because we're going to do a couple of layers of this, and I'll come back when this is complete. There we go. So after the Zandri Dust base layer has been put down, you'll see that 2 thin coats results in a really nice smooth finish, as you can see here. Now normally when you put base colour on like so, you'd add a wash and that's how you create the shading, but we actually want the Zandri Dust to form the shading for this miniature. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Citadel base colour Zandri Dust, we're going to take a slightly lighter colour which is the Ashanti Bone, and we're going to 50-50 mix those two together. So again, we're just going to take our Army Painter Precise Detail Brush, and we're just going to place a little bit of Zandri Dust there, and then I'm just going to wash that brush slightly. Always shake your pots of paint, very important. And we're just going to mix in the Ashanti Bone for a 50-50, it's just 1 drop of each, and that will create a slightly lighter colour. Now what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to take this Glaze Medium, again I bought this from Element Games, I'll stick this in the bundle below as well. And now one of the reasons why you might use a medium is that it means that the paint won't dry as quickly on the brush, which when you're mixing paints can be really cool and important, because if you run out of the amount of paint that you need to use, you don't want to be remixing and be getting different colours. So I'm just going to put a tiny little drop in like so, mix that in. So you don't always need to use Glaze Medium, but it's a good alternative to water when you're doing highlights. Now that's mixed in, I'm going to drag the brush and twist, and we're going to take the miniature, and what we're going to do is just on these raised areas, we're just going to start dragging down and creating the highlights. So it's still a little bit too thick for my liking. I want it to be a little bit more watery so we can see the colour underneath coming through, and that will create a nice blend, which is what we're looking for. But you can start to see that coming together. So what I'll do is I'll come back once I've done this for all of the miniatures, and you just see there a nice blend is happening, which is good. There we go, and now that that first highlight on the cape is done, we need to move on. Now one of the great things about the Silver Knight capes is that they are pretty simple to do. It's quite clear where the raised areas are, so you can just drag your brush down, and I do recommend that when you are highlighting that you drag your brush towards the area that you want to be the lightest. So you can just drag your brush down on each of the raised parts of the cape here, and that works quite well. Now we need to take a final edge highlight because this is a quick paint, so we're going to go for the Ashanti Bone from Citadel again. What we're going to be doing with this is we're just going to be marking out a very light edge highlight just on the very edges of the miniature. Okay, so we're going to do that right now. There we go, highlights applied, and as you can see they're looking reasonably nice. Now if you do find that the highlight is a little bit too stark, one little thing that you can do as a top tip is to just get a little bit of water onto your brush whilst the paint is still reasonably wet, and then just come up like so, and if you just take the water and just drag it over the area where you applied the highlight, this will just blend the lighter paint into the base colour just that little bit more, and gives you a bit of a softer highlight, which is always a good shout. And another way you can do this is actually to almost create a glaze with the highlighter colour. So I could really thin down some Ashanti Bone, and I could drag that over, and that will, what that will allow, because it's a very thin paint, is you'll see what I've done behind it through the layer that I put on top. But even just dragging a little bit of water over Make sure that the paint's not too wet when you do this, but it's also not fully dried, and that'll just create a little bit of a smoother blend. So now that we've done that, we need to move on to the next part, which is going to be the parts, the bits of black trousers that you can see behind the armor here. Now, although on the artwork that we've looked at, there are some like brown leather straps, these guys don't actually have that. So because they don't have that, we're just going to paint the black on, and I'll show you how to highlight that as well. And to do that, we're going to be using the Citadel color Abaddon Black. So now that we've painted the back of the trouser legs, as you can see there, we're going to use the Magic Black highlighting paint, which is Citadel's layer paint Eshin Grey. And this is all you need to be highlighting black, because it's very, very easy when you're highlighting blacks for it to start to look like it is grey. So what we need to do is a very, very, very light edge highlight of this onto the top parts of that. And if you do feel like you end up with a little bit too much of a stark contrast between the highlight and the base colour, then of course just apply another black wash. We're going to do that straight away. And there we go. So now that that Eshin Grey highlight has been applied, it just, if you can see there, just gives an ever so slight highlight to the black. And with that, I am pretty happy with how these guys are finished off in terms of the Silver Knight Swordsman. Now, do remember that I will be looking to base all of my miniatures from Dark Souls the board game using Generation Shift bases. That's Generation Shift 92. He does some fantastic custom bases which work really, really well with the world of Dark Souls. So I do recommend you go check him out on Facebook. In fact, just for you guys, I'll stick a link in the video description below and give him a shout. Now that the Swordsman I'm reasonably happy with, I am aware, having looked at the artwork, that the Silver Knight Great Bowmen have got gold bows. They've got great big gold looking bows. So what I'm going to be doing in this one is I'm going to be using the Citadel base colour Retributor armour, and I'm going to be applying that all across those bows. So we'll get to that now, and then it'll be a wash and these guys will be done. And there you have it. Now, one of the wonderful things about using the lead belcher spray underneath is that really we don't have to get a huge amount of coverage with the Retributor Armour Gold, because we almost want a little bit of that silver to come through and create a highlight unto itself. We're going in like a reverse order of painting almost, so we're actually allowing brighter colours to come through darker colours that we're actually putting on top, or layers. And that process is a little bit more like glazing. What we'll be doing once these have dried out just a little bit more, we'll be using the Army Painter Quick Shade Strong Tone, which are brownie colouring, because although this gold is very nice, what we want to do is we want to just darken it up ever so slightly, and we want to allow this to go into some of the detail which you see in the bow there, and that will just finish these guys off nicely. So let's have a little bit of a look. We'll shake up the ink and we'll see what they look like when we've done that process. And there we have it, our Silver Knight Great Bowman and Swordsman quick paint is done, and all in all these 6 should take you somewhere between 2.5 and 3 hours. If they take you longer though, not a problem, especially if you are a beginner, and that's what these painting videos are designed for. They're designed for you guys out there who maybe never painted miniatures before and are coming from maybe a board gaming background but would like to immerse yourself further into the universe of Dark Souls and get a little bit of paint on these miniatures. So this is a nice, quick, easy way of doing it. So as you can see, the ink on the Great Bowman just really picks out the shading. And what I also did as well with that final strong tone from Army Painter is I just did a little bit of that browner ink on the chainmail, just a tiny little bit on there. What that does is it just gives a slight rust effect very quickly. And I also put a little dabble on the bottom of all of the cloaks, so it looks like the cloaks are a little bit weathered, and I've done that across the board here. So there you have it, our Silver Knight paint. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you join me for the next Dark Souls the board game video here on Hotgates Gaming soon. There you have it, HCG Hotwires, another Dark Souls the board game painting video done. I must admit I did cop out a little bit by taking the easier option, a little bit easier than painting the hollow soldiers and the gargoyle for this video. That's due to time constraints. Remember, if you are enjoying these, then you can support this channel in a couple of different ways by checking the links in the video description below. I know that some of you Dark Souls fans out there have already got behind the Patreon, which is a great way of supporting this content, even if you're chucking in $1 per video, and you can put in a limit on what you want to do on that. Or alternatively, if you're looking to buy your hobby supplies, if you use those links in the video description below for Element Games, then those links will directly help this channel, which is great news. So I do hope you guys out there are doing that. I'm having a good game here. Hope you guys are having a good game out there. See you soon for more content.